And the reason why I decided to focus myself on AI art is because, again, I have an edge. When I started collecting street art, the reason why I was collecting street art is because I couldn't compete with any kind of super wealthy people that was collecting, contemporary art or modern art for 40, 50 years. But, with street art, it was all different
Mm.
because it was a new art segment and I was new, but I could compete with them simply because, I was fast. It was
Yeah.
my kind of cultural thing and it was easier for me to get a hedge in that. And for AI art, it's a bit the same.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Carlos Podcast, where I host conversations about on-chain art, tech, and culture. Today's guest is Jean-Michel Pailhon, who is the co-founder of Grail Capital, an investment fund that focuses on digital art, more specifically AI art. We had a great discussion about why he is excited about this segment and why he believes it's going to be a 1 trillion asset class. He also shared details about operating an investment fund. And we had a great part towards the end about AI art, touching on some of his favorite AI artists and how to get started collecting AI art. Thanks again for tuning in, and don't forget to like and share the episode and subscribe if you enjoyed. We are live. Hello, JMP. How are you?
Hello, hello. Very nice being with you today and with everybody. I'm looking forward to the conversation today.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I think you have been doing some amazing stuff. Where did you get your passion for on-chain art and culture? Why are you such a big believer in this movement?
Oh, yes. So actually, it's like everything in life. It's not like all of a sudden I woke up and said, okay, I want to dedicate the next 10 years of my life collecting digital art. It has been a kind of journey in itself. And the journey started when I was actually when I started working. I've always been kind of interested in art myself. When I was a kid, a teenager, I was attracted by paintings by Van Gogh and a couple of famous, painters. Um, but then, you're a kid, so you don't really do, you don't collect. You
Mm.
don't even know you can collect art actually. And then when I started working and making my own money, I said, okay, the first thing that I basically bought with my first salary was not a watch or a car or whatever, but it was a painting.
Mm.
So I am really a collector of art since I can remember, as far as I can remember. And having said that, when you are young, when you start to earn your own money, but obviously you are not like super rich, you need to find an edge. And I've always been looking for an edge in the kind of things I was collecting. So because I was young and because I was at the time working in TradFi between Paris, London, and New York. Obviously, the easy kind of art segment I could bump into at the time because I was in the right cities was street art. So I started collecting street art relatively young when it was relatively cheap, like Banksy, Shepard Fairey, Space Invaders mostly, and a couple of others, but eventually that didn't make it as famous as the last three of them. And actually, street art is very important for me and very important for my journey as well as a digital art collector because it brought me to everything that we are living right now. I had this kind of feeling that this art movement could be something important, that some of those artists could actually be culturally significant. But when I was collecting them, it was a long time ago. It was in 2006, or 07, or 08, or 09, so almost 2 decades ago. Basically, at the time, nobody, well, very few people were noticing. And more importantly, most of the traditional art collector and institutions were dismissing street art, like massively. And you,
Mm-hmm.
you, you could read a lot of articles in the UK specifically about what this is. It's not art, it's like simple stuff on the wall or whatever. So I've been used in collecting art that the establishment is not considering as being art. So fast
Mm-hmm.
forward, I kind of collected photography, contemporary photography, and again, photography is not very well regarded by the institutions and by the traditional art collector because they kind of believe it's not real art as well. And fast forward, in 2018, 19, and 20, because at the time I was an executive at Ledger, the security company for crypto
Hmm.
assets and NFTs, and I was VP product. At the time, I had no choice but to deep dive into the NFT space, more from a technical angle than from a collector angle. But eventually, the collector eventually came back, and I started collecting a bit of digital art by then. But I seriously started like in 2020 during the COVID and 2021, obviously, probably at the end of beginning of the year 2021. So just before Beeple sale at Christie's.
Okay.
And again, everything is like very much related because again, collecting digital arts on blockchains and receiving a lot of negative feedback by institutions, traditional art collector, journalists, and everything. Actually, I'm I'm very used to it because I've done that in the past with street art.
Yeah, you have seen it, right? It's kind of the story repeating itself, and quite interested in what you mentioned about collecting street art.
Mm.
How do you collect street art? Because maybe I'm not super familiar with street art, but I think of graffitis, I think of Banksy's, right? That he's creating this stuff on public spaces. So how do you collect that?
That's a very good question. Actually, real street art stays in the street. So normally you can't collect it or you can't remove it from the walls, which is actually the best thing to do. But because those artists that we are mentioning, either Shepard Fairey, Space Invader, or Banksy, were artists, full-time artists, they also designed specific pieces that were what we call
Mm,
either alias of what they were doing in the street. So,
okay.
for instance, Space Invader, that's a French artist that is putting Space Invader kind of tiles in the city all around the world. And obviously, you can't remove it. You can't. You can try, but it's very bad because it will damage the artwork, and basically you will get nothing at the end. But basically, it
Hmm.
was when he was putting one tile of a spaceship from Atari's game, Space Invader, on the street of Paris, for instance, he was creating a copycat that was actually in a plexi kind of special setup so that you could buy the actual the doppelganger somehow of the one that is in the street,
Hmm.
but a one that you can basically collect and keep on
Okay.
at your place and eventually put on your wall, etc., etc. So that they did it. A lot of them also did a lot of prints. So specifically, Space Invader and Shepard Fairey, and also Banksy, sorry, did a lot of prints from their kind of artworks in the street. And some of them also, because Banksy was doing a lot of stencil, he could use the stencil as well in his studio, not only in the street but also in his studio to again do a couple of artworks that were deriving from the original one that was in the street. So yes, that's actually possible to collect
Mm.
street art, but it's very important to leave the street art artwork in the streets where they are
Hmm.
and collect street art that are made for collectors and galleries mostly.
Yeah, so you have to reach out. How for example for Banksy, because what I understand is nobody knows who he is, right? So at early on, how could you get your hands into these Banksys that weren't, the how do you reach out? It's like he had a manager and you reach to their
Yeah.
manager, or how is it the case for a street artist?
Actually, Banksy is the first contemporary artist who has been made not by the art institutions and the museums and the traditional media, but by the internet. It means that, actually, to answer your question more directly, he had a website, not his website, but the website of his gallerist, that was Lazarides. And Lazarides was actually a friend of him when they were both like living in London, in the early 2Ks, in squats basically,
Mm-hmm.
and they were friends. And eventually, Banksy was the artist, and David Lazarides became his kind of gallerist slash agent. And Lazarides created a website that was basically selling the artworks of Banksy, mostly the prints.
Okay.
He had a special gallery to sell the originals, so the paintings and stencil artworks, but mostly it was actually acquired and collectible on a website. So internet made Banksy. And the funny thing is that it started also a kind of very dynamic secondary market of the Banksy's print, sorry, as from 2006 and 7, and most of it were actually tradable on eBay. So there was a lot of trading of Banksy's prints on eBay at the time, and you could see the kind of pricing going up and down. So it looks like it was like a very early days of something that we would have experienced later on
Mm.
with OpenSea and the trading of
Yeah.
digital artwork basically, which with much more liquidity and
Right.
way less friction. But still, eBay was the early days of OpenSea, I would say, for digital art.
Got it. Got it. No, that's quite interesting. I mean, we kind of went through to another topic, which is street art, but it's great to hear how that there are some similarities with what's happening with NFTs and digital art. I listened to a couple of your podcast previous interviews, and I've seen Grail Capital, and you mentioned that you feel like it's going to be huge, 1 trillion asset class. Can you tell us a bit about what does that mean exactly? Like, what does it mean to be a 1 trillion asset class?
Sure. So the reason why I came up with this idea of the 1 trillion USD asset class, and by the way, it will not be tomorrow. It will probably take us 10 or 15 years to get to that point. It's not a figure that is coming out of nowhere. It's a figure that comes from a different set
Mm.
of origins. The first is the actual size of the contemporary art market and collectibles, physical collectibles. It is a market that is, a little bit easier to kind of process right now in terms of pricing and stuff. It's more mature as well. And this is a market that every year Deloitte is doing an art report about the size of this market. And so the latest report from the end of 2023 was mentioning that contemporary art and collectibles owned by high net worth individuals was valued around $2.2 trillion. 2.2 trillions, meaning
Mm.
2,200 billions of dollars, which is relatively big. And it's only the market
Mhm.
of contemporary art and collectibles that is owned by high net worth individuals. So that doesn't count the ones that are in certain
Mhm.
foundations, in museums, and other kind of publicly owned, art place, I would say, or art uh,
Yeah.
institutions. So that's the 2.2. So when you come with 2.2, you say, okay, now that I know this market, what is actually the current size of the digital art market on blockchains? And that's the kind of
Mhm.
calculation that we did with Grail Capital for 2 years now. And the end result is that as we speak, this market is around 10 billion, slightly less than 10 billion. So on one side, you have the big contemporary art market
Okay.
that is a 2.2 trillion, and on the other side, you've got the digital art market that is 10 billion. 10 billion, that means very, very small. That's 0.5%, I would say, of the art market.
Mhm.
So it's very small. And now the question is, okay, because I've been doing that all my life, when I was in TradFi or in crypto at Ledger, I'm always starting with, okay, what is the market size? What is the total addressable market? How big can this market become? And I tend to believe that
Mhm.
this market is worth 10 billion right now. It's not it's not easy to come with a figure, but I tend to believe that every time technology gets into an industry, whether it's hospitality, mobility, everything we've been living for the past 30 years, it's always starting like small, only kind of finding a
Mhm.
niche and addressing this niche, and then
Yeah.
eventually it expands. And one day you wake up and 95% of the music is digital right now, right? And 25 years ago, it was not the
Yeah.
case at
Yeah.
all. So, and now, I mean,
Yeah.
I know that people are listening to music and they are buying some physical disc, and that's perfectly fine. But 95% of the music that is consumed every day is consumed digitally. So for me, art and culture will somehow
Yes.
follow the same path. I'm not saying that there will be no painting, no sculpture, no physical artwork anymore. I'm just saying that the digital art will just become a larger part of our life simply because that's the way it goes. Technology is always doing the same. And
Yeah.
again, it's a long-term play, so we have to
Yeah.
be patient. It's probably a 10 to 15 years time horizon, but I'm pretty sure that the digital art market could be around 1 trillion in 10 to 15 years. Again, it will not be a straight line to
Mhm.
success. We've seen that recently, where the market has been relatively depressed, especially very recently. But again, I've got the time. I'm relatively confident with my goal and objective. And if I'm wrong, I'm sure I will find something else during the journey. But I'm pretty sure it's inevitable. Honestly, I think it's inevitable that digital art becomes a big thing in the next 2 decades.
Yeah. No, I fully agree. I think there is a lot of potential, right? And I really like to look at numbers as well, but I haven't thought recently about the market value. I've been checking more the volumes, right? Which is very different, right? Because the volume, yeah, it's much like lower figures, right? And it maybe indicates something, but not necessarily that the market is growing or the actual value of the market, right? The volume is very different. Um, so that figure, it's quite interesting. I will start to think more about the size of the market the way you are doing. I think it's more a long term, right? It's the right way to think about it long term more than what's really happening today. Just one question: when you mention these figures and when you say art and culture, what do you mean by art and culture for when we think about NFT? So are PFPs in there? Are the bored apes in there? Or is it loose definition? What do you consider that to be in art and culture or not really? Hello, guys. I just wanted to take some time to remind you about my NFT subscription via Hypersub. All subscribers get access to my token gated newsletter articles. You also get the podcast episodes airdropped into your crypto wallet. 8% of the revenue is shared across all subscribers. You also get access to my Discord server and participate in monthly giveaways and allow list opportunities. You can cancel at any time, and also you can control the length. You can go on a month to month basis, or you can get a whole year at once. This is also how I can keep going with the newsletter and podcast, and your support really means a lot. Find the link in the show notes below, and you can always DM me through my social networks if you have any questions. Thanks for your support.
No, no, it's a very good question actually, and it's also very important to actually start by scoping very precisely what we are talking about. So coming back to your question,
Mm.
when we are talking about digital art and culture, we are only looking at art, and art is any form of art. It can be photography, AI, generative painting, digital painting, everything. And culture is more like collectibles. We are not encompassing, gaming. We are not encompassing meme coins and things like that, because we believe it's part of culture. Don't get me wrong, but because we have to make a choice, and because we tend to believe that the catalysts of growth or decrease of price and volumes of those markets are very different from the one that is applicable to art and collectibles, I would say. So that's why
Mhm.
we make a clear distinction between art and culture on one side, and gaming, meme coin, etc. That are again part of culture, but that we consider as another part of the market, that we are not necessarily focused
Mhm.
on ourselves. Which, by the way, has been probably more dynamic than the digital art and
Yeah.
collectible for the past year, mostly the meme coins actually. But
Yeah.
that's a different game for us.
Yeah, I think it's very important, as you said, to differentiate, right? Because NFTs now, I mean, it's a technology that can be used for tremendous amount of things, right? And it's good to have, these different areas, these different, yeah, niche areas. I also pay a lot of attention to what's happening, but I do see a clear difference, right, between PFPs, between meme coins, between high end art, and I think one of your favorite topics, which is AI art. I'm very very excited to talk to you about that. But before we dig into AI art, um, I think it's clear that you are very passionate about this space. You are somebody that understands financial markets, numbers, and projecting, right? And kind of have a thesis and work your way towards that thesis. So if people, so in terms of Grail Capital, right? If can you tell us a bit what is Grail Capital, and how can people, let's say, I'm interested in collecting or investing, what's the process like? What are do you offer a service? So what's what's the goal of Grail Capital, and how can people participate?
I will start with a why, and the why, you always start with the why, the manifesto, the mission, and the mission statement, basically,
Mhm.
of Grail Capital. I won't read it today because it's a relatively long manifesto. It can be found on our website, so it's grailcapxyz/manifesto, and I will provide you with the link afterwards so that it can be shared for those who are listening to this podcast. But basically, the reason why we founded Grail Capital is because we believe that the future of art and culture will go digital, and we want to actually facilitate and enable it in a way, not the only one, but be part of it somehow, and to make it easy, profitable, and safe for more collector and investor to participate in the digital art market. But again, we are an investment fund, so we basically collect money from professional and qualified investors only. So we don't collect money from retail investors, and we are not aiming at doing that. Only qualified and professional investors who
Mhm.
can afford a certain level of risk, a certain level of investment, but also in case the investment doesn't go as well as expected, or doesn't do a return as fast as expected, that won't be bothered by that, because they are relatively wealthy, and for them, the kind of money they want to put in this kind of strategy will not miss them, and it won't damage their
Yeah.
personal situation. So we are professional investment firm only, and we only target professional investors.
Mhm.
But again, I would say that we are doing three things because our mission is way beyond just being an investment fund. We really want to contribute to onboard and enabling to welcome, the next 100K, the next million collectors. And we are doing that by providing a lot of insight, a lot of communication, and a lot of education to the market. So we are basically doing three things: what we would call education, which is like creating content, publishing a lot of reports, participating to conferences and panels to talk about the market, and also getting interviewed and podcasts like this one. The second one is more the advisory part. So basically, we are advising a couple of corporations or private banks or family offices regarding their digital art collections. So we get a kind of mandate, okay, and they say, okay, we want to start a collection of digital art. Where we should start? With this kind of budget, what should we collect? And we basically, for an
Okay.
advisory fee, will provide them with a kind of indicative acquisition collecting list that they will execute themselves, or that they might have executed by a third party that we might be in position to introduce them to, like a broker, like a private bank, like a kind of technical partner that is able to do that. And the last part is properly the investment kind of arm that we have at Grail Capital, that is designing investment vehicle, basically, who are there to kind of provide our investors with a specific exposure to a certain part of the digital art market on blockchains with dedicated strategy. And when I mean digital
Mm.
specific strategy, it can be, say, okay, let's go for the blue chips of digital art on blockchains, or let's focus more on the
Mhm.
AI art, or the generative art, or the rising stars, or any kind of strategies. And we basically create investment vehicle based on one of strategy, and then we collect the money from investors. We execute on the strategy, and we collect the artworks that relate to the strategy that we design, and then we buy and hold, basically. So we don't trade at all. We are only a kind of passive collector, I would say. Passive in the sense that we are not
Mhm.
actively trading, but we might be more active on the behind the curtain, and we might be doing a lot of communication about the collection, about the artworks, and eventually we might do a little bit of lending and borrowing of the artworks, so that we create a bit of yield for our investors in the meantime.
No, that's fantastic. I love the full vision. Very, very, very interesting. I've been collecting. I don't think I'm a wealthy individual, right? But I do collect, and I'm always wondering, there must be like something like with a structure, right? Like something with a clear structure, more like a more professional thing. And you basically just described that. What's the process of advising when you get a new institution interested, right? So not necessarily on the monetary side, but in terms of the artist, the collection. What are your guiding principle, let's say, for this?
Well, I think that's a great question, and it's probably the most complex one to answer, because we are an extremely young, it's a really young asset. When you look at digital art on blockchains, even though there's a few that have been like Xcopy and a few other Akatao that were there in 2018 and 19, most
Mm,
of the market that we are looking at right now has been created in 2021 and 2022 and maybe 2023. So it's a 3 years market only. Again, except a few exceptions. So it's a 3 years market, which also means that the dust has not settled down yet. We start to see
mhm,
who will emerge as the winners. Winners meaning the top 10 artists or the top 10 collections, etc. But it's still a moving pieces kind of ecosystem. And the youngest the art segment, the most difficult it is yet to say those are the winners and those are the losers. And specifically, you are looking for the winners when you are collecting and investing. So again, that's let's start by being humble and just saying that we might be extremely wrong in our assessment. That being said, because it's only a 3 years market, but it's already now that we know that some of the artists that are there to stay, and that some of them are already in the biggest
mhm,
permanent collection of digital artwork of digital art collectors, but even some of them are actually in proper traditional art institutions and museums, like Tyler Hobbs, like Refik Anadol, like a couple of others are already there. They are in museums. So that's it. That's done. You can
mhm,
discuss the price. You can say, okay, maybe it's too expensive, maybe it's cheap. I don't know, but at least Tyler Hobbs, Refik Anadol, Beeple, Squiggle, CryptoPunks, Ringers, Gazers, and a few others have already kind of entered into the traditional art world, and others have been doing so. So it's not an exhaustive list that I'm making there. So again, as a kind of advisor, we are looking primarily on that. We are looking for what we call culturally significant artworks made by culturally significant artists that are basically there to stay. And it's a difficult
yeah,
task because you never know. It's a young market, and again, when I was into street art back in the days, you could feel as well relatively easily that Banksy, Invader, and Obey Giant would be part of the winners. It was relatively obvious, but you had a lot of people at the time, other artists that were there, and you could say, okay, maybe this one will be as successful as, and eventually they were not. Most of them vanished. So I'm not saying that will be the same for digital art, but I think that collectors and investors need to be extremely cautious because it's a young market.
mhm,
It's very difficult market condition, as you know right now. The volumes are low. The price have been going down quite a lot, and it's not sure that all the artists that are in the market right now of NFT that they will still be doing art in 5, 10 years from now.
yeah,
Some of them will continue, and some of them will be extremely successful, but some of them simply, for good and bad reason, will do something else.
yeah,
And that's more difficult to
right.
kind of continue to maintain a kind of value of their artworks by doing so.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So it feels like museums and institutions collecting specific works and artists. It's a good indicator. I'm wondering, so two things. One, what's the typical path? This could be something you have seen from other kind of funds. I'm more to be honest, I'm more knowledgeable about funds, VCs, right, that invest in technology, for example, venture capitalists. I kind of understand clearly how they work. They basically invest in companies, and when the company is in another round in the future, or they go to through an IPO, they can cash in their stocks, right? How does it work for art funds, right? So what's the typical path for profitability for Grail Capital, but maybe for some of the clients or institutions that you work with, or maybe from the past, right, from the history of art funds? What are some examples? How does it work? Because if you have a massive collection, then it's also complicated, right, to actually sell it. Do you have some stories there?
Yeah, sure. Actually, I will start with a story about street art, and then I will move into the digital art space. Because the reason why I basically created a digital art fund is because I didn't do one in street art. Twice I had the opportunity to do a street
Mm-hmm.
art fund, and I didn't do it. And actually, the first one was in 2008, just before the great financial crisis, the GFC. I was in New York, and I had
Mm-hmm.
colleagues who were way more um, older and experienced than I was, and they were way more wealthier as well, and therefore they could afford. And they said, okay, let's do a $1 million street art fund. And eventually, because of the GFC, we decided not to do it, and it was a big mistake because if we had done it, it would have been a crazy return right now. It probably we were like 50 or 60x on what we would have collected by that. But that's life. And
Mm-hmm.
again, in 2017 and 18, I had a friend of mine who knew me as a collector, and because he knew that I was kind of relatively good collector of street art, he said, "Okay, why don't we build a fund again together?" And the reason why we didn't make it was for logistics reasons. I mean, physical art is a nightmare to collect, to store, to insure, to just maintain and guarantee the origin, the provenance, the scarcity, everything. And fast forward, obviously, when you look at NFT, it's magic. In terms of storage, as soon as you manage properly, and you use a ledger, for instance, or a proper, custody solution, secure custody solution, it's fine from a storage capacity. You don't have a problem. I mean, it's not, you don't need to have a big space to collect and to store your artwork. Everything is on the blockchain.
Yeah.
So the storage, the provenance, the scarcity, the logistics, all those problems are solved. So it's actually way, way more convenient to have an investment fund, sorry, in digital art than it is in any kind of other art business. So that's also why I'm not looking much at what the art fund have been doing in the past, because it's not very applicable, I think, to what we are doing. I think that what we are doing is a mix between stock, crypto, and art and culture. It's a mix of those four.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's
Yep.
probably the way investors should look at this new asset class. Having said that, as you said, because we are not doing trading, we are only buying and holding. There's actually three ways to make some money with a digital art fund. Basically, first, when you sell. So indeed, at the end of the investment vehicle lifetime, you sell and you liquidate, and you basically get back the money to investors, hopefully more than the one that they put in the money in the first place. So that's the first one, the easy one. The
Mm-hmm.
second one is by actually creating a little bit of dividend or reward by creating some kind of lending, and then you get payment, and then but you keep the artwork, and then eventually you purchase it again, and eventually you can get some return that can be relatively okay, especially depending on what you do with the money that you get. And the last bit is actually something that is very, I think, understated and very badly understood by market participants. I also believe that some of the artworks are also tokens of that will provide with other perks in due course. So you could imagine being, I don't know, just like, and I'm not mentioning that it could happen again, but if you had a Bored Ape like in the summer 2021, with the Bored Ape,
Mm-hmm.
you just by owning it, you collected, you were airdropped, a kennel, and then a mutant serum, and then ape coin, and a few other stuff, just because you own it. And I'm not saying that it will be the case for all the artworks, because that's not the purpose of an artwork. The sole goal of an artwork is being a cultural piece of art, and voila. But I tend to believe that some of the artwork might generate some kind of indirect yield in the long term, by providing like kind of gift to faithful collectors, for instance. And you could imagine that some artists will actually be happy to have some collector being faithful again, and because they keep the artwork for a year or two, maybe they could be airdropped a new artwork. So again, I think that direct and
Mhm.
indirect yield might be a way to generate some, positive return to investors and collectors beyond the simple fact to sell the artworks in the end of the fund.
I mean, it's a very complex topic, but I'm sure that many listeners now have a clear, many artists out there that are familiar with how the funds operate have a clear perspective now. So thanks a lot for sharing how the typical art funds work, but also how your fund and why it's different, right? And that's, I think, very very critical. Um, but now let's get into a topic I know you are very enthusiastic as well, which is AI art. You have been sharing a lot of information, sharing a lot of artists. You have been collecting a lot of AI art. So can you tell us why is it special? What is it that you are seeing there in the AI art?
Sure, AI art. So, just like street art in a way, I looked at AI art. I've been there for some times now in digital. Obviously, everything accelerated 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, I would say a year and a half ago, when ChatGPT, DALI, and all those kind of software popped up, and all of a sudden made everybody, capable of doing his own or her own artworks, or very easily, and using AI as well became all of a sudden extremely accessible to the masses. So I would say that AI art was pre-existing. There was Robbie Barra, there was Obvious, there was a couple of artists, mostly on Braindrops, Claire Silver, and a couple of others with Genesis, who kind of who dropped actually AI artworks, in 18, 19, 20, and 21. And again, late 22, we saw a new wave of AI artists coming up, like Rupert Ernesto, and then some months
Mhm.
after that, the Nice Aunties, and now Elman Mansimov, and a few others that keeps on coming. And there are actually a lot of AI artists right now in the market. But again, I think it's a very fascinating market for me. And the reason why I decided to focus myself on AI art is because, again, I have an edge. When I started collecting street art, the reason why I was collecting street art is because I couldn't compete with Bernard Arnault, François Pinault, Roman Abramovich, or any kind of super wealthy people
Mhm.
that was collecting, contemporary art or modern art for 40, 50 years. First, because they were way more wealthy than
Yeah.
I was. Second, because they had like 30 or 40 years of experience of collecting art, and I was just a newbie. But with street art, it was all different,
Mhm.
because it was a new art segment, and I was new, but I could compete with them simply because I was fast. It was
Yeah.
my kind of cultural thing, and it was easier for me to get ahead in that. And for AI art, it's a bit the same. I was relatively kind of slow to get into the generative art segment. I was okay, but not the greatest, I think, collector in the field. Whereas in the AI art, because it was just like in front of us, creating just in front of us, it was easier as soon as you were dedicating enough time and you were having the right people to discuss with, both on the creator side, the artist, and the collector side. You were able, I think, to build a relatively rapidly good knowledge of the AI art market. And that's what we did at Grail Capital at a professional level, but also that's what I did at a personal level as a collector myself. And that's why I
Mhm.
decided to double down on that, both
Okay.
personally and professionally. And that's also because I believe that this segment is relatively small. Again, because we are talking about market size and stuff, it's probably a market. If you aggregate all the Robbie Barat, all the Refik Anadol, all the Nice Aunties, and Lion Joe, and basically all the fellowship AI things, you probably arrive to a global market of 150 million USD right now, more or less,
Yeah.
which is big and small. again, 150 million compared to a
Mhm.
10 billion for the overall digital art market and culture on blockchain. So it's a very small market actually right now. And again, it's 1.5%. So will it stay 1.5%, or will it go to zero, or will it go to 5%, 10%? I'm always playing that kind of game of, okay, let's estimate the size of the market, let's estimate the market share, and let's imagine what the market share could be in the future. And I tend to believe that AI art, for
Yeah.
technological, cultural, and social and demographic standpoint, it's probably an art segment that will grow massively over the next 5 to 10 years. And I expect it to be anything between
Yeah.
5 to 20% of the digital art market in 5 years. So it's relatively big growth in terms of market share.
Yeah.
And obviously, the question then is how big the market of digital art will become then. Because if it decreases in size, but the market shares increase, it might just stay the same size. But if the digital art market grows, as I said, and
Mhm.
it's a 1 trillion market in 10 to 15 years. And if the AI art market is a 15 to 20% of that, that's a 200 or 150 to 200 billion market all of a sudden, which is coming from 150 million. So that's
Yeah.
a 1000x. So that's not bad.
No, I love it. I love it. I love to hear these numbers because in my mind they make a lot of sense, right? It's it's as you said, there is always risk. It's very hard, right, to predict these things. I wonder, in a sense, this term AI art, right? Because I feel like AI is going to be part of many things in our life, right? From devices at home, from your mobile, everything right now is incorporating AI, and I wonder if this term AI art will survive, if there will be a clear, this is AI art, this is not, or it will just be art. Not right now, but maybe 10, 20 years from now. Do you think that will be a thing, like if it was done or created with AI, or if it wasn't, will be a critical factor 10, 20 years from now?
That's an extremely smart question to ask ourselves. Um, will the AI art still be a thing in 5, 10, 20 years, or will it be totally embedded into art? I don't have any answer to that, to be
Hmm.
honest. I just believe that we are living in a moment where AI in general is extremely cautiously, regarded by all the stakeholders, generally speaking, outside of the art market, and specifically AI art is extremely dismissed by most of the market participants right now. When you look on Twitter or Instagram, and when you see a post by Nice Aunties or Rupe Ernesto or whoever the artist is or a collector, you will see a lot of backlash, a lot of critics, people saying, "Oh, but it's not art. How you dare." I mean, it's very it's a lot of negative feedback, and actually I like that, because when there is negative feedback, it means
Hmm.
that you are doing something right. Because when you are not doing something right, people don't notice you, but when you do something right, you are bothering some people, and the more you bother people in the art world, the better it is, because it means that you are doing something special, that is not conventional, that is moving, the frontiers of the art in a global way. And I believe that this is actually a very good signal of the potential of the AI art, the fact that they receive so much shit, while when they post something
Hmm.
or when they produce art. So for me, it's that. But again, as you just said, it's quite possible that in 15, 20 years, we'll not even notice art is art. So I don't have any answer to that question actually, but
Yeah.
that's why I'm extremely interested in actually looking at that, watching the space, and seeing as well where it's leading us, because I don't know for this.
Yeah, it's always evolving, right? It's always evolving, and that's what makes it exciting, and also risky in a way, right? And you need to be paying attention. And to that, I mean, to that point of paying attention, and being aware of what's happening. What would you say? Let's say there are some listeners, there are many collectors in the audience, but maybe they are just starting in the AI space, right? They want to collect AI art. They believe in your vision, right? They love your numbers, but maybe they don't have a fund. Maybe they don't have millions of dollars. So where will you say like a casual collector, let's say with $1,000 to invest per month, or somewhere between that, where can he start? And will you go with new releases, or will you go through, to what has already been released today? What will be a good strategy, in your opinion, for a newcomer collector?
Well, good question again. I think I will. Um, Again, I think it always starts with two things. First is an investment principle, which is diversification, and the second is like grow your taste, learn by collecting or learn by reading. We have the chance to have a relatively good, uh, segment ecosystem of people, collectors, and artists on Twitter X, which is actually, even though we are complaining all the day, I mean, the level of quality of people that are there and the level of information that you can collect for free just by reading tweets is extremely high. And actually, most of the things I've learned, and even the way I kind of uh, thought and build my knowledge and my kind of vision of the market, it's mostly deriving from a kind of consensus that was made in my brain based on the reading that I did, on Twitter. So diversification is first, and second, knowing what is there, what is available. I would say that again, the AI market is art market, sorry, is very young. It's again a 2-3 years max, 2 years, let's say. Robbie Barra's nude portraits are totally out of reach. They're worth like
Mm,
hundreds of thousands uh, of USD. So don't start with that. But there's a lot of great collections out there. There is Refik Anadol that is for sure a great artist and already, like, again, in museums, and it's a relatively safe bet. And sorry for the analogy, but for me it's a bit like the T-bones of AI art. So you can't be wrong if you
mm,
collect something from Refik, even though he has a lot of
yep.
collections. So you need to be a bit cautious on which one you collect, because some of them are more expensive than the other, and some of them might last and become more valuable both culturally and economically
Yep.
than others. So, but look for those kind of artists, and then there is a new class of artists, or new class. There is obviously Rupe Rinesto, that is great, with Life in West America. That is probably one of the best post photography collection that is extremely iconic and extremely important from a cultural angle.
Mm,
Most of the collectors have this in their collections. It's relatively expensive. I don't have the last price in mind, but it's still relatively expensive. And then you have a line draw by Man Mensimov. You have nice aunties, and you have new artists, not new artists, but artists that are doing new drops. So recently, I think there's a couple of collection that obviously attracted my attention, and one of them is obviously the latest drop on Brain Drops, actually, which is
mm,
Infinite Ways. Let me just check that I'm not I'm properly kind of Infinitier, sorry, Infinitier. So
yep.
Infinite Yay, sorry. I think you will be able to cover that.
All the collections will be, and all the artists will be in the show notes. So everybody
Cool.
listening, you can just check the notes and get the link directly.
Cool. So Infinity, for instance, did a great drop last week. I think it was Friday. It sold out in a relatively fast matter, probably 30 minutes, which in the current market is extremely successful. And I think the
Yeah.
floor price is
Mhm.
around 0.15 ETH. So that's still okay in terms of pricing. And then there is this new collection by Ollie Andon and Matt Dryhurst with Fellowship, that is kind of the powerhouse of AI art, that did a drop over the weekend. that is called Infinite Image, that is extremely sought after by most of the AI art collectors because they were the first one to be actually proposed to use DALL-E when it was still in a kind of stealth mode. So the artworks that have been generated by
Yeah.
them are from 2020 and 2021 or 2021 and 2022. But they were the actual first AI generated artworks with this new technology. Even though the very first is actually a line draw because Edman Mansivov
Mm.
created the prompt to the text to image prompt engine
Yeah.
in 2015. So that's even before. So
Mm.
again, we are talking about history right now, and history is in the making. So it's just happening in front of us. But I still believe that there's a lot of opportunities for all the budgets. And again, if I had like 1,000 to invest, 1,000 USD to invest every month, I will take my time, but I will probably pick one of those latest collection at 0.10, 0.15 ETH, or maybe 0.30, maybe, even though it starts to be like the top of the budget. And if I have a little bit more, I will
Mm-hmm.
start to also add to that some of the collection that are more expensive, like the Nicenties and the Line Draw. And then if I have a little bit more budget, I will go for Life in West America. And eventually, those who are extremely wealthy, they can try to fight to get one of those nude portraits by Robbie Burr. But those are the super grails of the AI art, and they are extremely difficult
Okay.
to collect. Oh, and before I forget, I think there is actually a disclaimer. I am biased because I'm collecting them. But for me, there is an artist trio that is called Obvious. They happen to be French, but
Mm.
that is not the reason why I'm collecting them. But they were very early with AI art as well. They did one of the first AI
Mm-hmm.
art auction at Christie's in the summer 2018, I think. And actually, that was Bellamy, the sale of Bellamy, and I think they sold for 200 or 300K USD at the time, which was like totally unexpected. And they've been doing a relatively nice production since then. And I think they are a little bit under the radar. But I think their art is great. And I also know that they are supported by a lot of, institutions, and they are working with a lot of institutions and
Mm.
museums and academic research labs. So they are probably a bit the underdogs right now. I don't know to call it properly, but they are like a bit like under the radar, but they could become very big in the future. So, and they are relatively cheap. So there might be some good bargains to
Yeah.
do as well on their art.
A great summary. Really, really appreciate it. There are some of the artists that you have mentioned. So Rope was in the podcast a couple of episodes ago. So if anybody wants to learn the process how Rope Reinisto creates his art, you can check that episode. I think it's number 38, 39 maybe. But this is a great list. This is a great list, Jean-Michel. Thanks so much for sharing. It's been a pleasure. We've been talking for almost an hour. I feel like I learned so much from an investing point of view, how to run a fund, what you're trying to do, but also from the AI world. I think it was I mean, there is room for many more conversations, right, about AI. I think it's so interesting. But hopefully in the future we can chat again, see how the space is evolving, and yeah, see what else you are collecting during those days. So thanks so much, Jean Michel.
Thank you, Calo, and thank you everybody for listening to us. And hopefully we'll see each again, on Twitter and maybe even to conferences and events. I'm looking forward to it. So see you very soon.